Tactical JRPGs occupy this beautiful, kind of brainy ground in the world of JRPGs. Unlike traditional turn based games, tactical games demand spatial awareness, resource management, and a high tolerance for permanent consequences, especially when permadeath is involved. But here's the kicker: even within this niche, there's an incredible amount of variety. Some are story driven epics, some are complete chaos, and some are the more quiet cult classics that kind of flew under the radar. And in the last few years, we've seen a lot of really great tactical games. And in today's list, I'm giving you the top 10 tactical JRPGs, a mix of legendary franchises, some indie surprises thrown in the mix that really pushed the genre forward without forgetting what made it click in the first place. So, with all that said, let's jump right in. Originally released in 1995, Tactics Ogre is one of the most well-known games in the genre. With Tactics Ogre Reborn in 2022, Square Enix didn't just revive a classic, they really took it to the next level. Reborn is not just a port, it's a full rebalancing of systems that once felt somewhat archaic at times, now refined to meet more modern expectations. The class system has been overhauled to allow more flexibility in party development, encouraging you to build towards strategy. Enemy AI has been reworked to offer more dynamic and situational challenges, and the formerly punishing crafting system is now more streamlined, turning what used to be a tedious barrier into a more meaningful and honestly fun layer of preparation. But as important as these mechanical changes are, Tactics Ogre remains defined by its story. They splinter the narrative into distinct paths, dramatically altering the lives, deaths, and allegiances of characters across a branching campaign. This isn't choice for the sake of novelty, it's baked into the game's structure and morality. The consequences are often uncomfortable, sometimes irreversible, and always meaningful. Combat is incredible and holds up super well today. Battles are unforgiving but fair. The verticality of maps adds tactical consideration to every move. A poorly positioned unit can be punished within a turn, while a well-placed caster or archer can control the entire flow of the encounter. Tactics Ogre Reborn is one of the rare remakes that elevates the original without compromising its identity. It respects the player's intelligence and time while still offering the layered, methodical gameplay that defines the whole genre, in my opinion. For newcomers, it's a masterclass in strategic design and narrative ambition. For veterans, it's a reintroduction to a game that helped define the possibilities of storytelling in tactical games, and it's really complex, so you can really dig into what this game has to offer. The Dialfield Chronicle occupies a weird space within the tactical JRPG genre, one that feels intentionally experimental. I couldn't sit here and call it 100% a tactical game, but it leans heavily into that gameplay style with some mechanical changes that challenge long-standing design conventions by introducing real-time tactical systems into a genre long dominated by a turn-based structure. The result is an ambitious hybrid of sorts. One part tactics, one part RTS, for lack of a better way of explaining it on my end. At the core of Dialfield is its real-time with pause combat system. Instead of managing a turn order queue, you issue commands dynamically, positioning units, activating skills, and responding to shifting enemy formations in real time. It's a system that emphasizes fluid decision making over more rigid planning. The ability to pause the action and reassign commands adds a layer of flexibility that keeps every encounter really engaging. While you're not controlling individual attacks moment to moment like in an action RPG, you're constantly recalibrating priorities, interrupting a powerful enemy skill, repositioning a vulnerable unit, or just launching a full-on attack from multiple fronts. This active structure gives this game a momentum that's rare in the genre. Skirmishes unfold quickly, but they demand spatial awareness and timing. There's less emphasis on incremental buffs or stat tweaking and more on battlefield control and precision. Despite lacking the granular depth of a class-based system like in Tactics Ogre, this game provides a focused framework through the four main archetypes: soldier, cavalry, sharpshooter, and mage. Each have distinct battlefield roles and upgrade paths. Skills are meaningful, cooldowns matter, and the synergy between unit roles often determines the outcome of an entire battle. Structurally, the game favors concise missions. Most battles are contained and relatively short, often taking less than 10 minutes to complete. This pacing, paired with its clean interface, makes Dialfield especially well suited to those who want a tactics experience without heavy time commitment or more sprawling campaigns. There's a clarity to its loop that I really enjoy, and it's got that one more battle type feel to it. Narratively, however, Diofield Chronicle is more divisive. The story unfolds during a period of political disputes, and while the scenario itself is compelling, the presentation lacks the emotional weight or depth seen in other tactical games. Characters are well designed from an artistic standpoint, benefiting from the game's unique diorama style visuals, but the voice direction and dialogue delivery can feel really flat at times. But after finishing the game, I can honestly say the experience as a whole is really well worth your time. The Diofield Chronicle may not be the definitive new direction for tactical games, but it's a meaningful step sideways, an alternative approach that opens the door for innovation in a genre often more defined by tradition than most. Triangle Strategy is a deliberate, structurally ambitious tactical JRPG that places as much emphasis on political philosophy and moral tension as it does on the whole battlefield control. The game leverages the HD 2D art style originally introduced with Octopath Traveler to craft a story-driven experience that's more complex than I had ever anticipated. What results is one of the most narratively sophisticated, strategically thoughtful titles out there, hands down. Triangle Strategy follows a young noble navigating a fragile alliance between three rival powers. The conflict begins over control of resources, but quickly unravels into something larger and much more complicated. Where the game distinguishes itself most clearly is in its commitment to player agency. The branching narrative paths determined by the whole scales of conviction system aren't superficial. Your choices affect not just story beats or dialogue, but which characters join your party and which battles you actually fight. The voting system used to resolve major decisions is particularly effective. Instead of simply choosing a path, you must convince your party members to vote in favor of your position. Gathering information, weighing evidence, and interpreting character motivations all become part of the strategic process. It's not just strategic in its gameplay, it's strategic in its story and how it unfolds. Combat, meanwhile, is very fun and spatially aware. Battles play out like puzzles, where positioning, elevation, and turn order define your success. Attacking from behind results in critical hits, while flanking enables follow-up strikes. The game also introduces elemental terrain effects, burnable oil, water that can be used for electrical attacks, and even freezing conditions. All of this turns each map into a dynamic, reactive environment. The character roster is broad and very thoughtfully designed. Rather than relying on class swapping systems, Triangle Strategy gives each unit a defined identity and role. One character might specialize in terrain manipulation, another in trap deployment, and another in wide range support. This design choice pushes players to think in terms of team composition rather than optimizing a handful of overpowered builds. It's worth noting that the game moves at a deliberate pace. Between battles, you'll spend long stretches exploring dialogue-heavy cutscenes, participating in world building, and navigating moral debates. For some, this storytelling density may feel excessive, but for others like myself, particularly those who value heavy storytelling in their games, it's a rich and rewarding experience that really elevates the game in every way. Devil Survivor Overclocked stands as one of the most distinct entries in the whole tactical JRPG canon, not only because of its mechanics, but because of how seamlessly it fuses strategic combat with real-time narrative urgency. Originally released on the Nintendo DS in 2009 and later released on the 3DS, Overclocked is an expanded version of the original Devil Survivor, offering additional content, voice acting, and an extended narrative epilogue. But what remains most compelling is how the game redefines what tactical RPGs can look like in handheld form. Set in quarantine Tokyo under siege from demonic forces, the game introduces a 7-day timeline structure. You and your companions, ordinary students caught in extraordinary circumstances, are isolated by a government lockdown as supernatural entities begin to surface. The central mechanic tying it all together is the death clock, a number next to each character's name that indicates how many days they have left to live. This seemingly simple visual device creates a pervasive sense of tension, transforming what could have been a standard strategic loop into a race against time where narrative and mechanics are tightly interwoven. Combat in Overclocked operates on two layers. First, characters are moved across a grid-based map in a standard turn-based framework, but when engagements occur, the game shifts into traditional SMT-style battles. Positioning, turn order, elemental affinities, and critical hits all play a significant role. Each encounter becomes a self-contained battle within a broader tactical structure. It's a rare hybrid that manages to preserve the strategic appeal of both formats. The game's demon fusion system is equally integral. Drawing from the core SMT games, players can recruit demons mid-battle, customize their abilities, and combine them to create increasingly powerful allies. The system isn't just cosmetic, it directly influences how your teams function on the tactical layer. Because each character commands a team composed of one human and two demons, success often depends on how well you've optimized your team. Support demons that provide buffs, attackers with elemental counters, or defensive builds that absorb critical damage. It's all very well put together and makes the game just a ton of fun. Narratively, Devil Survivor Overclocked excels by giving players real, consequential agency. The 7-day structure breaks each in-game day into discrete time blocks, with you being able to decide which characters to speak to, which missions to engage in, and which leads to follow. These choices not only affect story progression, but who survives, which paths become available, and what kind of ending you experience. This is a really slept on game, and if you haven't played it, make sure you do so. Fire Emblem Engage represents a calculated return to mechanical precision for the series, one that prioritizes tight map design and tactical clarity over the narrative complexity or structural experimentation. Developed by Intelligent Systems and released in 2023, it follows what is my personal favorite in the series' Three Houses, but intentionally shifts away from that game's social simulation and more story-focused structure. In its place is a more traditional combat-focused game, one that recenters Fire Emblem around its original identity, battlefield strategy. The most distinctive feature of Engage is the emblem system, a crossover mechanic that allows units to pair with legendary characters from past Fire Emblem games. These emblems, Marth, Ike, Lucina, and many others, are more than nostalgic cameos here. They grant powerful skills, stat bonuses, and unique active abilities that can dramatically alter a unit's role. Engage refines unit identity. Characters are encouraged to lean into specific roles, and the interplay between base stats, learned skills, and emblem bonuses creates a layered system where planning a unit's growth feels really purposeful. There's less sandbox and more structure here, and in this case, the limitations foster more meaningful optimization. Combat, meanwhile, is where Engage excels the most. Each map is a carefully calibrated puzzle with deliberate checkpoints, flanking opportunities, and positional traps. High ground, forests, and narrow corridors are essential features to be leveraged or avoided. Where Three Houses use time and routine to generate attachment, Engage shifts that emotional engagement to the immediacy of battle. Character interactions are much lighter, and the central narrative follows a familiar, more high fantasy trajectory: a sacred hero, a world-ending threat, gathering of nations. You get the point here. But visually, I must say, Engage is among the most polished entries in the entire franchise. The art style is more bright and colorful than most. If you have a Switch OLED, this thing pops in handheld mode. I mean, this is probably one of the best games you can get for that OLED screen. It really is one of the more colorful games out there, and it's honestly beautiful, in my opinion. For those interested in Fire Emblem as combat first and narrative framework second, it's one of the most effective executions of that design philosophy in recent memory, and why I put it on this list specifically. Unicorn Overlord marks a distinctive evolution within the genre, offering a large-scale, real-time approach that sets it apart from its more traditional counterparts. Developed by Vanillaware, a studio known for its richly illustrative narratives, the game draws inspiration from classics like Ogre Battle while reimagining their systems for a more modern audience. It delivers not only a mechanically robust experience, but also a rare sense of strategic breadth, one that emphasizes army composition, battlefield awareness, and long-term planning over the more individual micromanagement type mechanics. Rather than following the conventional turn-based grid template, Unicorn Overlord structures its combat across sprawling, real-time maps where units maneuver dynamically. Responding to terrain, timing, and enemy deployments, you will issue movement orders and positioning directives, but the true tactical depth reveals itself in the game's preparation. Once opposing forces engage, combat enters a semi-automated turn-based phase where success is dictated by the conditions and priorities you configured ahead of time. Units act based on pre-assigned logic, healing thresholds, targeting rules, attack order hierarchies, which transforms the preparation phase into the core tactical element and honestly the main driving force of the game. This design encourages high-level planning over micro-intervention. Effective play hinges on creating balanced squads with complementary skill sets and understanding not just unit strength, but how and when that strength activates. What makes Unicorn Overlord particularly effective is how it balances the system driven approach with narrative accessibility. Rather than relying on genre tropes, the storytelling leans on a high fantasy world grounded in loyalty, rebellion, and the slow kind of coalition building that comes with building an army. The game's cast design supports all of this so well, with dozens of recruitable characters, each with their own narrative side arcs and unique combat roles. Unicorn Overlord rewards exploration, not with filler, but with meaningful expansion of your strategic toolkit. The depth of character integration extends into battle, unit roles are clearly defined, and synergy matters more than, raw power. Visually, Vanillaware's signature art style reaches an all new height. This is by far the best and my favorite art style of all their games, and I'm someone who's played the vast majority of them. The Battlefield UI is clean and functional, while character animations feel really alive and are incredibly well done in combat. Unicorn Overlord also just respects your time. It avoids unnecessary grinding, padding, backtracking, or artificial roadblocks. Encounters scale intelligently, pacing is great, and it all just comes together so perfectly. The result is one of the best tactical games I've ever played, full stop. This is definitely one of my all-time favorites. Disgaea 7 is a course correction for a series that had begun to drift away from its tactical roots. While 6 introduced significant changes, including full 3D models and a heavily automated combat system, it also lost a measure of what made the franchise engaging in the first place: direct player control and the satisfaction of granular control over its sprawling mechanics. Disgaea 7 trades the standard fantasy setting for a realm inspired by feudal Japan. While the plot is filled with exaggerated personalities and comedic flourishes as you would expect with any Disgaea game, it is more cohesive than previous entries. Mechanically, this game streamlines and retools several of the systems that have become increasingly unwieldy over time. The return to 2D sprite-based visuals is more than just an aesthetic shift. It brings clarity back to the battlefield, improving both readability and performance. There's a new feature which allows characters to grow to enormous size and dominate the map. It is more than just a gimmick. It introduces positional and terrain-based considerations that expand the tactical approaches for the game. Rather than simply inflating damage numbers, it actually reshapes how space and power are negotiated during encounters. Customization remains at the core of the experience. You still have access to a robust job system, equipment upgrading, and the franchise's signature item world, which once again encourages extended exploration of procedurally generated dungeons. However, the pace of progression has been tightened here. The UI is more responsive and systems are better explained. Tutorials now integrate more naturally with the gameplay, making this arguably the most accessible Disgaea game for new players without sacrificing depth for veterans. And I wouldn't call myself a veteran necessarily. I play a few Disgaea games here and there, but more recently I've become more interested in the series, so Disgaea 7 was a lot of fun for me. And what distinguishes this game as a whole has to be its renewed focus. It understands the appeal of limitless power scaling and ludicrous damage numbers, but recontextualizes them within a system that demands forethought and experimentation. The result, honestly, is a game that recaptures the spirit of the early titles while introducing quality of life improvements and more thematic cohesion that modernize this experience. I do think this is one of the better Disgaea games I've played in recent memory. Vandal Hearts may not have the legacy or reach of a Fire Emblem or a Final Fantasy Tactics, but it occupies a foundational role in the early development of console tactical RPGs. Released in 1996 for the original PlayStation, it arrived during a pivotal moment, one when the genre was transitioning from a more niche curiosity to big, mainstream viability. What Vandal Hearts brought to that evolution was a focus on clarity, pacing, and design efficiency, traits that remain notable even by today's standards. The game's combat system is deliberately streamlined. Each character fits cleanly into traditional tactical archetypes, and the simplicity of the systems is a strength, not a limitation. Without an extensive job system or complex passive trees, The tactical focus remains on positioning and decision making rather than optimization. Victory depends less on statistical manipulation and more on spatial reasoning, threat assessment, and turn economy. Every encounter becomes a question of risk management and resource trade off. That efficiency extends to the game's structure as well. With a runtime of approximately 20 to 25 hours, Vandal Hearts is short by genre standards, but never feels incomplete. It's designed to be a contained tactical experience, one that respects your time while still offering meaningful challenge and narrative payoff. Every chapter introduces a new wrinkle, a varied map layout, vertical terrain, environmental hazards, or enemy types that demand specific responses. Narratively, Vandal Hearts presents a familiar but well executed story of military conspiracy and rebellion. While the dialogue and localization reflect the limitations of its time, the storytelling remains effective through tone and pacing. Character arcs are brief but impactful, and the plot is structured to move quickly. The game's class system, while modest, adds an appreciated layer of customization. Characters can promote into one of two advanced classes, allowing for limited but meaningful input in how your team evolves. While its visual presentation and interface design are undeniably dated, Vandal Hearts remains a tightly crafted tactical experience. For those seeking a pure, focused tactical RPG, this is a classic that is often slept on, but one I think deserves a spot on this list. Fell Seal, Arbiter's Mark, is a rare case of a callback done right. Developed by an independent team with a clear reverence for tactical RPG history, the game draws heavily from the foundational systems of Final Fantasy Tactics and Tactics Ogre. But rather than merely imitating the genre's most iconic features, Fell Seal refines and recontextualizes everything for a contemporary audience, offering a clean, well structured experience that balances mechanical complexity with accessibility. At the center of the game, an arbiter tasked with enforcing the rule of law in a world governed by an immortal ruling council. The story unfolds as a tale of institutional failure and hidden power struggles, with corruption threatening the very system you are sworn to uphold. While the narrative doesn't attempt to subvert genre tropes, it avoids unnecessary bloat and maintains focus throughout. Where this game truly distinguishes itself is in its depth of the mechanics. Battles unfold on familiar isometric grids with turn based combat, elevation mechanics, and environmental positioning. The pacing of encounters is tight and focused, with clear objectives and balanced difficulty scaling. What sets the game apart, however, is its extensive class system. With over 30 classes and more than 200 abilities, the customization potential is endless. You can combine active and passive skills across classes to develop highly personalized units, enabling a wide range of strategies from traditional role archetypes to hybrid builds that challenge expectations. What's most commendable is how the game encourages experimentation without barriers. Job changes are fluid, ability loadouts are easy to modify, and progress through the class system is very steady. The flexibility creates a sandbox for creativity. You can iterate freely on unit builds, adapting to new challenges without fear of lost progress. And honestly, you can create completely game breaking units, and I love it when a game allows you to do that. Fell Seal also excels in its overall design. Quality of life features such as fast forwarding combat animations, toggling enemy AI previews, and customizing difficulty levels make it one of the most approachable tactical JRPGs out there. The game respects your time, level grinding is rarely necessary, and progression feels earned rather than artificially extended. Visually, the game adopts a hand drawn art style with a storybook aesthetic, character animations are clear, spell effects are well telegraphed, and maps are diverse in both layout and theme. While its story pacing slows slightly in the second half and the narrative remains relatively straightforward, this game succeeds where it matters most. It delivers a strategically rich, mechanically deep tactical experience that feels both familiar and very finely tuned. For those seeking the depth and flexibility of the genre's classics, but with the accessibility and polish of modern design, Fell Seal stands as one of the most accomplished indie entries in the game. Fire Emblem Path of Radiance released in 2005 for the Nintendo GameCube, and it marked a pivotal moment for the franchise. It was the series' first foray into the 3D visuals, the Western debut of protagonist Ike, and perhaps most importantly, a confident narrative that somewhat defined how the story in future Fire Emblem games would be handled. Mechanically, Path of Radiance is one of the most structurally sound entries in the entire series. Combat is grid-based and turn-based, with terrain modifiers, weapon durability, and unit positioning playing central roles as you would expect. Objectives vary across missions. Map design is particularly strong, with layouts that encourage both forward planning and thinking on your feet. Permadeath remains a defining feature, and Path of Radiance balances this with careful pacing and a deep roster of over 40 recruitable characters. Each unit has a unique class, growth trajectory, and narrative presence. While not every character is equally viable at every difficulty level, the game encourages experimentation and time investment. Progression systems are clean and well paced. Class promotions occur naturally through leveling, though master seals can be used to accelerate this growth. The balance between freedom and structure in party development is carefully managed. It allows you to shape your teams meaningfully without trivializing difficulty or strategy. Visually, the game reflects the limitations of early 3D console RPGs, but in my opinion, for its time, it looks incredible. I actually can't wait to replay this one on GameCube NSO soon because I have some very fond memories of it. Path of Radiance is great, not just because of what it introduced, but because of what it balanced: story and system, emotion and execution. It serves as a transition point between Fire Emblem's classical era and its more modern evolution. And to me, this holds up as one of the best Fire Emblem games of all time. Anyway, that's it from me in this one. Tactical JRPGs are definitely different and require a new way of thinking. They're not just about stats and systems, they're about decision making and thinking on the fly. I hope that if you're looking for a great tactical game to play, that you found one here. Let me know in the comments below if you've played any of the games on this list, and if there's any games not here that you would have liked to see added. I look forward to reading your comments. Until next time, I'm out.